Support for our podcast comes from Symphony 3, which has announced exciting news. It's launched its innovative Smart Glue platform on the AWS marketplace. That makes the secure and affordable integration solution accessible to government agencies worldwide. The platform includes over 50 pre-built connectors specifically designed for public sector systems, government APIs, enterprise solutions and AWS services to transform citizen experiences by breaking down data silos. Smart Glue delivers operational excellence for local governments through cost reduction, process optimisation, improved decision-making and scalable architecture, all while maintaining comprehensive security and compliance standards required by public sector organisations. Get in touch to see how Symphony 3's expanded team and solutions can support your goals. Head to symphony3.com to find out more. Coming up, another monitor for Whittlesea as a Commission of Inquiry report raises serious governance concerns. Maribyrnong's mayor back at work as his legal proceedings end. Councils unite against an unpopular tax. The council lobbying for councillor term limits. Parramatta Council sacks its CEO. A Queensland council loses nearly $2 million to a sophisticated fraud. And while WA's Shire of Coolgardie avoids suspension, a rural councillor does not. Hello, I'm Chris Eddy. This is the Local Government News Roundup for Wednesday, the 15th of October 2025. Also today...
local government is being continually eaten up. It's like Pac-Man, where the spring thread is slowly eating up the controls of local government. They're taking us further and further away from the coalface.
Moorabool Mayor Paul Tatchell on his ongoing dispute with the EPA and why other councils should be concerned. That's ahead on Roundup Extra. The podcast is brought to you by the Victorian Local Governance Association, the national broadcaster on all things local government, with support from Symphony 3, simple, connected customer experiences. Leading off the podcast today, the long-awaited release of the Commission of Inquiry report into governance practices at Whittlesea City Council. Local Government Minister Nick Stakos yesterday announced the appointment of Stephen Kingshott, effective from today, as a municipal monitor at Whittlesea. It comes as the 6-month suspension of former Mayor Aidan McClendon expires this week. Appointing yet another monitor to the council was one of 17 recommendations by the Commission, including 4 towards the council and 13 to the government. The government said it would respond to the remaining recommendations in due course. Let's have a look at some of what the Commission had to say in its lengthy report. The Commission said it had serious concerns about the conduct of Mr McClendon when he was mayor, but that there were also shortcomings in the performances of the councillors, the CEO Craig Lloyd and the administration and the deputy mayor that contributed to the problems at the council. It found that councillors were divided along political lines and did not exercise due diligence in deciding to elect Mr McClendon as mayor in November 2024. It also found that the relationship between the mayor and the CEO broke down very early after the election, and that was a factor in the events that subsequently unfolded, noting that the CEO was very quick to escalate matters to integrity agencies, exacerbating rather than calming internal tensions. With regard to Mr McClendon, the Commission found his conduct was detrimental to the council and that he failed to adequately perform the role of a mayor. It recommended that the Local Government Inspectorate investigate a number of complaints about the former mayor promptly, noting that an internal arbitration process paused during Mr McClendon's suspension would resume. Mr McClendon told the ABC that the report was a political witch hunt motivated by differing political views and that he did not expect any tension when he returned as a councillor later this week. In addition to the appointment of a monitor, the Commission has recommended a number of measures to improve councillor relationships, particular support from the monitor for the CEO in performing aspects of his role and for his relationship with the returning Councillor McClendon, and further training for Councillor McClendon, finding that he failed to meet required standards of conduct. The Commission also recommends changes to the Local Government Act around mayoral election timing, terms of office and guidance for mayors. It suggests the Act be amended to allow councils to remove mayors who are failing to perform their role under certain circumstances. It's also recommended a Local Government Integrity Commission be established to deal with all allegations of misconduct for alleged breaches of the Act, replacing the functions of the Inspectorate, Internal Arbiters, Councillor Conduct Panels and VCAT's Gross Misconduct function. The City of Whittlesea issued a statement noting the release of the report and saying it would consider all elements of the report and make no further comment at this stage. A link to the Commission's report and the terms of reference for the appointment of the Municipal Monitor can be found in the show notes for this episode. Now to other news. Councillor Pradeep Tiwari has returned to his duties as Mayor and Councillor of Maribyrnong City Council this week after the conclusion of legal proceedings that began in August. Councillor Tiwari said he was thrilled to be back, and the council said it would not be making any further comment. The Herald Sun reported that Councillor Tiwari admitted to driving with his small son on his lap on a Melbourne freeway. He escaped conviction and was fined $450. Councillor Tiwari, believed to be the state's first mayor of Indian heritage, stepped aside from his mayoral and councillor duties after being charged in August. In an unprecedented show of unity, all 79 Victorian councils have joined forces to protest against the Emergency Services Volunteer Fund. Regional Cities Victoria, Rural Councils Victoria and the MAV say the new levy unfairly shifts state costs onto local ratepayers, particularly in drought-stricken rural and regional areas. The councils have formally written to Premier Jacinta Allen and Treasurer Jacqueline Symes, calling for the fund to be withdrawn and redesigned with proper consultation. While councils say they strongly support emergency services volunteers, they argue the ESVF undermines local budgets and disproportionately impacts regional communities. Ballarat Mayor Tracy Hargraves said it's a grossly unfair tax that hits communities already struggling with rising costs. In her municipality, the levy will cost ratepayers over $6 million more each year. Mornington Peninsula Shire Council has voted to lobby the MAV to support the introduction of term limits, preventing councillors from serving more than 12 years in their lifetime. The Mornington News reported that the motion, moved by Councillor Bruce Rankin, was passed 6 votes to 3 after debate was cut short by a procedural motion, drawing criticism from veteran councillor David Gill, who walked out of the meeting. The proposal would now need to be accepted by the MAV, endorsed as policy, and then require state government amendment to the Local Government Act before it could take effect. And the MAV has honoured long-serving councillors at its annual Service Awards, recognising their dedication to local communities across the state. MAV President Jennifer Anderson praised the councillors for their commitment, noting that the demanding role is often undertaken alongside other jobs and family responsibilities. Awards were presented for service milestones ranging from 10 to 30 years, with Councillor Des Phelan notably receiving recognition for 3 decades of service to Golden Plains Shire and the former Shire of Grenville. More Victorian Council news in brief. Greater Shepparton has secured the Australian Junior Motocross Championships for 2 consecutive years, with the event returning to Moorabool in 2026 and 2027. The 5-day national competition will feature 300 of Australia's top junior riders and is expected to attract over 1,500 visitors to the region. Murrindindi Shire Council is encouraging residents to participate in the annual Aussie Bird Count, running from the 20th to the 26th of October. It follows a recent Birds in the Backyard webinar hosted by the council, where wildlife expert Dr. Graham Cleary discussed how bird behaviour affects environmental health. And the City of Whittlesea is taking action after a community kite festival left Mernda Recreation Reserve littered with kites in trees and neighbouring properties, breaching event permit conditions. Council crews have been deployed to clean up the site, with costs to be recovered from the event organisers, who may face future permit denials. This is the Local Government News Roundup. It's Wednesday the 15th of October. Our podcast comes your way 3 times a week. Lots of news to share with you today, and we'll get into that Parramatta Council sacking in just a second. But first, a quick note from the VLGA, a reminder to councillors in Victoria that the councillor census is being conducted now. It's the second annual iteration of the census. All councillors would have received an email in their inbox on the 6th of October, and you have until the end of the month to complete the survey. All responses are anonymous and confidential. And if you'd like to know more about the survey, why it's being conducted and how, check out the latest edition of VLGA Connect that dropped on the weekend on YouTube and podcast. The VLGA is supporting the Local Government News Roundup since episode 1. On now with episode number 504. In a dramatic late-night session on Monday, the City of Parramatta Council has terminated the employment of its Chief Executive, Gail Connolly. The Sydney Morning Herald reported that the decision has exposed deep divisions within the council. Councillors voted 9-6 to immediately dismiss Ms Connolly, who's been on extended sick leave. The decision came after a tense meeting that stretched until nearly 11:30pm, with raised voices reportedly heard from inside the closed chamber. The termination follows a series of controversies surrounding Ms Connolly's tenure, including allegations of inappropriate remarks to staff, improper withholding of documents from councillors, and ongoing exit negotiations previously reported by the Sydney Morning Herald. The vote split largely along party lines, with all Liberal councillors except Georgina Valjak voting for termination, along with several independents and crossbench members. 3 Labor councillors voted against the dismissal, while 3 others abstained. George Bonassif, who's been serving as acting chief executive during Ms Connolly's absence, will continue in that role for the time being. In a statement released to the press just after midnight on the night of the meeting, Mayor Zeta thanked Ms Connolly for her service and assured residents the council remains committed to delivering services to the community. The council followed up with a formal media release yesterday confirming the termination, and ABC News reported that Ms Connolly issued her own statement highlighting achievements including the Parramatta 2050 strategy and a doubling of staff satisfaction rates. Ms Connolly acknowledged a period of turbulence with significant leadership issues, including 4 different Lord Mayors and several councillor resignations. In other New South Wales news, Whittlesea Council has formally opposed the New England Renewable Energy Zone Network infrastructure project, citing inadequate consultation and a lack of justification for the proposed transmission line route. Mayor Eric Noakes has criticised EnergyCo for making a sudden route change that would run transmission lines east of Nundle into Whittlesea Shire, with 3 of 4 substations located within 35 kilometres of the town. The Armidale Express reported the council is demanding confirmation that all alternatives, including undergrounding options, have been properly considered before any development proceeds. From the Deniliquin Pastoral Times, Murrumbidgee Council is leading a push to overhaul councillor remuneration across New South Wales, proposing pay increases that would see rural councillors earn $60,000 annually instead of the current $13,930. The motion is to be presented at the LG New South Wales conference in November and argues that current payments are grossly inadequate and compare unfavourably with other government positions requiring less responsibility. North Sydney Council is considering introducing mandatory bookings and fees for private tutors using public libraries, according to the Sydney Morning Herald. Mayor Zoe Baker is supporting the proposal as a way to generate revenue and stop commercial operators from overcrowding public facilities. Supporters say tutors are clogging libraries, particularly after school hours, making it difficult for other residents to use the space. But critics argue fees would be passed on to families already paying high tutoring costs. And from the Daily Telegraph, Woollahra Mayor Sarah Dixon has issued 9 demands to the New South Wales Planning Minister, including halting housing reforms in Edgecliff and Double Bay until a new train station at Woollahra is approved, funded and constructed. The Mayor is calling for commitments on schools, infrastructure and public spaces before 10,000 new homes are built around the proposed station site. Planning Minister Paul Scully has rejected the demands. Rounding up more New South Wales Council briefs, Newcastle's youngest Deputy Lord Mayor Callum Poole has handed over the role to Charlotte McCabe in a ceremony at City Hall, marking the first changeover under a power-sharing arrangement between 4 councillors over 4 years. Councillor McCabe becomes the first Greens Deputy Lord Mayor in nearly a decade and will serve for a year before Labor councillors Declan Clawson and Deanna Richardson take their turns. Narrabri Shire has announced that the township of Narrabri is moving from Level 4 to Level 3 water restrictions following improved reservoir levels and strong community cooperation. The Namoy Reservoir has reached 82.12% capacity, supported by water-saving efforts and the reintroduction of the Tiberina Street bore supply. And Lake Macquarie councillors have voted to defer proposed changes to the council's funding and sponsorship policy amid concerns about a plan to limit event funding to 3 consecutive years. The Newcastle Herald reported that councillors want community consultation before implementing the 3-year cap. On to Queensland, and Noosa Shire Council has revealed it was the victim of a sophisticated international fraud during the Christmas period, losing $1.9 million to organised crime gangs. CEO Larry Sengstock says the fraud was perpetrated by international criminals using advanced AI social engineering techniques and not through a cybersecurity breach of council systems. The incident has been under investigation by Australian Federal Police and Interpol, which is why the council couldn't go public until now.
We've been unable to bring this to public attention until now, as when police initially alerted us to the fraud, they directed us not to publicly disclose any information so as not to compromise their ongoing investigation.
Mr Sengstock said no council staff were at fault or involved and says the criminals were highly organised professionals who managed to bypass existing security processes. The council has implemented recommendations from the Queensland Audit Office and is installing additional third-party software to strengthen controls. Mr Sengstock said the incident is a warning to others.
This incident also serves as a warning to other councils and local businesses to be on their guard and to continually review processes around all financial procedures. Unfortunately, as we are seeing every day in the media, scams and frauds are on the rise and many companies and organisations are being targeted.
Mr Sengstock told a media conference that the council was in negotiations with insurance companies about what could be recovered. The Sunshine Coast Daily reported that Mayor Frank Wilkie was stunned by the incident and determined and focused on ensuring it doesn't ever happen again. Bundaberg Regional Council has launched the Safe Spaces Thriving Places project to revitalise the city's CBD through collaboration with council, police, businesses and community groups. Mayor Helen Blackburn says the initiative will address antisocial behaviour and rough sleeping while modernising infrastructure and improving accessibility in the city centre. Sunshine Coast Council has appointed consultants to design a new $12.8 million town square in Caloundra, following a $4 million contribution from the Queensland Government. The project will create a pedestrian-friendly civic and cultural hub, linking the Events Centre, Library Plus and Caloundra Regional Gallery with improved pathways and green spaces. Construction will commence mid-next year to be completed by mid-2027. The City of Moreton Bay will provide land at Moreton Bay Central in Petrie for a new $60 million TAFE Centre of Excellence. The Queensland Government facility will deliver training in construction, engineering, electrotechnology and advanced manufacturing, with construction set to begin in 2026. The centre will be located near Uni SC's Moreton Bay campus to foster collaboration between TAFE and university students. And Rockhampton Regional Council has resolved to submit a temporary local planning instrument to the state government to guide the development of battery energy storage systems across the region. The instrument was shaped by community consultation, including 4 public meetings and 68 formal submissions, addressing concerns about setbacks, bushfire safety and environmental impacts. If approved, the TLPI will remain in effect for up to 2 years, while permanent planning scheme amendments are developed. News from further afield in Tasmania, Kingborough Council is celebrating winning the National Greyhound Coast Care Award for Kingston Beach Coast Care, recognising 25 years of dedicated volunteer work protecting the coastal environment at Kingston Beach. The award highlights the successful collaboration between volunteer groups, Kingborough Council's biodiversity team and Landcare Tasmania in achieving significant environmental improvements. In South Australia, the District Council of Robe is calling on the federal government to review Australia's funding formula for local government after receiving just $42,321 in general purpose funding for 2025-26, the lowest allocation in South Australia at only $26.27 per resident. Mayor Lisa Ruffle says the coastal town services up to 20,000 visitors at peak times on the rates of just 1,600 permanent residents. while other small regional councils receive 10 to 40 times more support per capita. The council warns it's been deemed potentially financially unsustainable by the Essential Services Commission, facing escalating costs from coastal erosion, heritage site maintenance and tourism infrastructure that the current funding model fails to recognise. From Western Australia, the Shire of Coolgardie Council has narrowly avoided suspension after responding to a show cause notice issued by the state government. Local Government Minister Hannah Beazley has announced she will not suspend the council despite serious concerns about the Shire's financial management and governance. The council was required to explain why it shouldn't be suspended under the Local Government Act after a notice was issued in late August. While Minister Beazley acknowledged the council has made some initial efforts to address its financial challenges, she warned that significant risks remain. The minister has set strict conditions. All council members must complete financial management training and the Shire must provide regular updates on its financial recovery plan to the Department of Local Government. Minister Beazley said it's deeply disappointing that substantial state intervention was needed to get the council to be accountable, adding that she'll give the Shire up to 12 months to get its house in order. The Shire's financial position will be closely monitored over the next year, with the priority being stable governance and essential services for the Coolgardie community. And a Western Australian councillor has been suspended after refusing to apologise for defamatory statements about council staff, according to ABC News. Mount Magnet Shire Deputy President Ian Black will be off the council for 3 months, following a ruling by the State Administrative Tribunal. The suspension stems from an incident last May when Councillor Black stapled a printed notice to a council notice board making defamatory comments about 2 Shire employees. The notice accused one staff member of having small man syndrome and called another employee a liar multiple times. CCTV footage clearly captured Councillor Black posting the document, which was addressed to local ratepayers and residents. The Local Government Standards Panel found Councillor Black had breached the council's code of conduct and ordered him to make a public apology. When he failed to comply, the matter was escalated to the State Administrative Tribunal. Still to come on the Roundup, my interview with Councillor Paul Tatchell from Moorabool Shire Council in Victoria about the ongoing dispute there with the EPA and the broader implications for the sector in Victoria. That's coming up on Roundup Extra here on the Local Government News Roundup, which is supported by Symphony 3, bringing you simple, connected customer experiences through their unique Smart Glue platform, now available worldwide on the AWS Marketplace. Find out more at symphony3.com. Let's start our global report with more on the wash-up from New Zealand council elections. Lydia Glidden has been elected as Selwyn's new mayor with a commanding 73% of the vote in the wash-up, defeating 3-term incumbent Sam Broughton. Ms Glidden has promised to scrutinise council spending, including the $59 million Waikarakiri Cycle Trail project, and aims to reduce rates to a single-digit increase. The press reported the election has resulted in an almost entirely new council, with only 2 councillors retaining their seats. John Glover has been elected as Queenstown Lakes District's new mayor, defeating incumbent Glyn Lewis. The Otago Daily Times reported that 5 incumbent councillors have been ousted in what Glover describes as a clear message from voters for change. Ken Laban has made history as New Zealand's first Pacifica mayor, winning the Lower Hutt mayoralty. The long-time broadcaster and sports commentator defeated 3 other candidates in a comfortable victory, according to a report from Stuff. And Whangarei Mayor Vince Coccarullo appears to have been ousted by challenger Ken Cooper, with late votes flipping the result on Sunday afternoon. Coccarullo claims he's been the victim of a hate campaign related to his opposition to water fluoridation after his council defied a Ministry of Health directive earlier this year. Newsroom reports on the wider trend, with 33 of New Zealand's 66 city and district elections on track to deliver new mayors, with elected candidates leaning more fiscally conservative than in the last elections in 2022. Here's some of the latest council stories from BBC News in the UK. Wokingham Borough Council is seeking public consultation to extend its public spaces protection order, tackling car cruising for another 3 years. The current order, introduced in 2022, has been highly effective, with a 41% annual drop in reported incidents and 73 fixed penalty notices issued. Oxfordshire County Council is facing legal action over its planned congestion charge in Oxford, with campaign group Open Roads for Oxford sending a pre-action protocol letter challenging the decision. The group claims public consultation responses were not properly considered before the council approved the temporary £5 daily fee, which is due to begin on the 29th of October. Staffordshire County Council, now run by Reform UK, has voted to overturn its 2019 climate emergency declaration, saying it will focus on immediate environmental issues instead of unfunded long-term targets. The council's cabinet member for connectivity said net zero targets had been distracting from main priorities, including the economy, education and supporting vulnerable residents. And from The Guardian, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has condemned what he calls disgraceful rhetoric from Labor and the Green Party after George Finch, the 19-year-old Reform leader of Warwickshire County Council, was allegedly assaulted. Finch says his alleged attacker called him a racist and fascist before the assault on Friday, language he claims echoes recent comments from political opponents. And an update on a recent story out of Ontario. Cambridge City Hall is fully reopening after police concluded an investigation into multiple disruptive incidents involving threatening remarks, inappropriate conduct and unauthorised access to restricted areas. CTV News reported that while the investigation has ended with no criminal charges filed, the city will maintain enhanced security measures, including bag checks, controlled access and on-site security personnel at council meetings. It's time for this week's Roundup Extra, and I'm being joined today by councillor Paul Tatchell, the Mayor of Moorabool Shire Council. The council has found itself at the centre of a major dispute with the EPA over who should pay for cleaning up toxic waste illegally dumped on Crown land. Councillor Tatchell joins us to discuss the $500,000 clean-up bill forced upon ratepayers, an upcoming illegal dumping summit, and why he believes this case could set a dangerous precedent for councils across Victoria. Councillor Tatchell, good to have you on the program, and thank you for coming along to talk about this extraordinary issue you've been having with the EPA. How far back does this go?
It's now probably, from our involvement directly, it'd be probably 4 months, but I think overall it's about 2 years.
Right. So when did you first become aware of the toxic waste situation in question?
When we got a letter off the EPA telling us that we were responsible, and it was our responsibility to move it. And we were given a certain amount of time, I think it was 28 days, to respond. And of course, we took to the VCAT based on the order, and that's when we went down and investigated the problem.
When did you become aware that the EPA had, in fact, you believe, been monitoring that property for some time before this all became your issue?
Well, fairly quickly. I mean, it came up in conversation anyway, but ultimately when we arrived at the site, we saw that there was a camera in place already, and the place had been deserted for quite some time. So ultimately we knew that. And when during the discussions at BCAT, that all of that came out, that the place had been under surveillance, and that it was only when these trailers were moved onto Crown land 2 weeks prior that they took advantage of that and then said, well, we'll just send the bill to council, based on the fact that the perpetrator was a bankrupt and was unlikely to, they were unlikely to get any money out of it.
So what do you think the EPA should have done?
Well, the interesting thing is that after we've seen what waste was there, we found out that there's probably 4 times that amount on the property. So the EPA were well aware of what the product was, and it was acetylene cylinders that had been in the news quite some time ago now, because they were full of asbestos. And there's only one place in Australia that's been designed to deal with this issue. So it was a bit opportunist. We went onto the site, we seen what was going on and seen how many more pallets of these cylinders there was. The EPA had no interest in removing those. The only thing they had an interest in was removing the 2 trailers that had been parked out on the road. And they were just being opportunistic. I mean, realistically, they were 10 feet away from the property. They could have backed them back in there, come in and chat to us and said, righto, we have a joint problem here. Why don't we, have a joint solution and sit down and, like grown-ups, and be a little less troglodyte, a little less petulant, and come to a solution. Realistically, and it's by frustration through local government to all parts of government is that I think we're getting further and further away from what our role is. We're in a people business, but we seem to be getting further and further away from people. And we're bogged down, if you like, in our own bullshit. And the sooner we get away and start acting like adults and probably taking responsibility for whatever roles we have, whether it be the EPA, whether it be local government, the mayor, whether it be the premier, it doesn't really matter. We all have responsibilities, but we also need to remember that we're in the people business. And that should be foremost in our minds at all times. But what's happening now, we have that many government departments that they're in the cover my ass business, not to protect the people business. And that's a serious concern to an old dog like me that's used to being straight up. And I'll tell it how I see it. Doesn't mean I'm right. But, I like people to be just straightforward and honest. And the minister's been pathetic on this. I mean, he's hidden in his cave waiting for something else to happen because that'll take the spotlight off what he's doing. But in the meantime, every man, woman, child and kelpie has had to put their hand in their pocket in my region to pay for something that shouldn't really happen.
We're talking about $500,000 here. Where does that figure come from and why is it so expensive?
Well, I think everyone's taken the proverbial out of I've done some work in that business. We've had a transport company for a long time. We've moved prescribed waste and we had an environmental company for a while. And I can tell you that it's become more and more expensive. And when you're the only game in town that can deal with these products, obviously the prices skyrocket. There's a lot of unscrupulous operators out there. And since this thing started, I think it was lucky that I've been in their business. You could tell the ones that are going to dump it somewhere else based on their price. And so it's a very, very expensive thing to be playing with. But this is only the tip of the iceberg. I mean, we've dealt with, a very small amount of these cylinders when in reality there's about 9,000 of them floating around Victoria. So, I mean, this is where we want EPA governments to stand up and understand the bigger picture and stop looking for a cheap way of getting country people to pay for what inevitably they knew about all the time. Could have stopped it at any time, but they're very opportunistic and said, well, wait till they put the trailers on land managed by council and we'll give them the bill. I mean, what sort of people think like that?
Yeah.
Certainly don't.
What level of confidence did you have that you might have won the case at VCAT that ultimately you didn't? Was that a surprise?
Look, I always thought we were pushing the proverbial up a fairly steep incline. The fact is the legislation was against us. But what I'd hoped is that someone would look above the legislation and try and work with the common sense aspects of what had happened. And unfortunately, as you know, Chris, that common sense seems to be a rare commodity in today's world.
Yeah. And I believe you filed a number of freedom of information requests with the EPA that have been denied. What is it that you think you might like to know that you don't know, and why is transparency so important here?
Well, I think in any of these issues, transparency is key because if it is a dangerous product, and they are the EPA, ultimately, first and foremost of our responsibilities is to protect the people. Now, if the EPA knows something that we don't, and the EPA has been sitting on this for 2 years, they knew exactly who did it. Why wouldn't we want all of that information so we can actually, as I said before, get around the circle like grown-ups and understand the depth and breadth of the problem, and then come up with a sensible solution that protects all of the people. That's why we're in the people business. If we're not, we should get out. The reality, and the leadership shown by the EPA has been absolutely atrocious. But the fact is they've been struggling here to lead it for some time because just like any apple that's been sitting in the sun, I think it's got a core problem.
Yeah. Just by the by, this week I noticed the Victorian government has announced $21 and a bit million to strengthen its illegal dumping task force and to fund the EPA for cleaning up illegally dumped waste across the state. I'm not sure if you've seen the detail of that, but I wonder if it's partially...
Yeah, I've seen it coming as $8.5 million. So I haven't seen the 21 million, but I've seen the rural sector at 8.5. Now I could be corrected on that, but that's the information.
It'll be a component of that money, I assume. Is this in some way responding to the issue that you've had, or is this just a sideshow that's going on?
This is what they do: is they put a shiny thing out there, and geez, that'll get people's attention away from the real problem down there at Moorabool. Let's have a look. We're doing a fantastic job. Put it in reality, 79 councils. I mean, we're talking $8.5 million on a gig like this. We've just spent $500,000. They weren't too concerned about that. And really, by the time it gets washed up in the current bureaucracies that surround these governments, you know how it gets thinned out. It's like putting it through a sieve. And then ultimately what lands on the ground is hardly enough to even rectify, put paint to the real problem. And it's just time that, geez, a bit of common sense. We're saying to these people that had they sat down and took a sensible approach, this could have been resolved, and we could be both working together to protect other councils, other private properties, because it doesn't just affect council. Private properties out there can be dumped on their land. Anyone who's on acreage and could have something put on their land. It's not like they go down the bottom 10 every week. If they've got stop grazing or whatever, and someone puts a product down the bottom and they don't know about it, ultimately they're responsible. Now, that's a legislative issue. Putting $8.5 million out there is a shiny thing for people to look at. But let's get back to the core of the problem. No one has made any attempt, either from the EPA, the Minister, the Premier, not one of them, not even our local members, have made any attempt to try and rectify the real problem here. We're saying to them that potentially there's 8,500 of these bottles scattered throughout Victoria that's either going to land on a very small council that'll send them bankrupt, land on someone's property, send them bankrupt, or we've got to land back on our property, and we're getting pretty close to bankrupt if we keep throwing away $500,000 of ratepayers' money on problems that really aren't our issue.
Yeah. I want to touch a little bit more on that broader issue you just raised, but before we leave the $500,000, what sort of an impact does that have on your budget? As you say, you're a small rural council. What is that $500,000 not going to buy for Moorabool ratepayers now?
Well, personally, it's about 1% of our, so that has an immediate effect. We've already budgeted to do works and have, to fix roads and to make sure our facilities are up to scratch. Well, it has to come from somewhere. And so immediately we go back to the drawing board. And this isn't, it's $500,000, not including lawyers and barristers. And, we know they're not 2 and 6 at the corner store.
What has that cost you so far, do you know?
Well, we haven't got the final tally, but we've been very fortunate. We've had a barrister who's been very generous and passionate about this issue. So we may come out of it okay, but I would suggest we're not going to get any change out of a couple $100,000.
Yeah.
I mean, doing anything courts today, and that's another thing that governments need to look at, is that, is the people's court too far away from the people anymore just on cost? Because if we're doing it as the local government, how do the little councils do it? I mean, we're very fortunate we've had compounding growth, so we've probably got enough room to absorb some of the pain. But imagine if it happened to some of these smaller councils like a Hepburn or Golden Plains or something like that. Glenelg, it would send them over the edge, and the government would be sitting back saying, well, it's your fault because you haven't managed your money. How we've done our budget, funny enough, our budgets always seem to come in on time, and we seem to be able to manage our budget. I mean, let's have a look at yours.
All right. You have talked about how this could become a problem for other councils and for private landowners, and I noticed that you've got some support through the MAV state conference with a motion about this, and you're bringing together representatives from councils for an illegal dumping summit. What are you hoping that will do to raise awareness for the issue?
Well, firstly, we're a little frustrated they took the MAV to get moving on this. I mean, it has been going for a while. But anyhow, the point is at least they've come to the party. I mean, they may not have brought all the presents, but they've turned up, and that's the main thing. Look, we're quite happy to have them at the table. There's plenty of fairy bread for the bureaucracy too if they want it. So, but ultimately, we're going to have a summit. I mean, because we've taken a real view on this. Whilst we may not be able to save ourselves in terms of the $500,000, I think we have a responsibility as another council to make sure that we put all the cards on the table and be very upfront and honest about where we sit. And not only that, to send warnings out to not just other councils, but to private landowners to be on the lookout and be aware and understand that the current legislation will cause up some problems. I mean, ultimately, it puts a risk beyond their audit and risk. And sadly, I mean, we've got local government is being continually eaten up. It's like Pac-Man, where the Spring Street is slowly eating up the controls of local government. They're taking us further and further away from the coal faces where we belong. That's our knitting, our next door neighbours. They're our people, so they're our tribe. So ultimately, while all this is going on, we're stepping further and further back from this. So the summit is about trying to bring those people together, especially country people, because it's become very, very convenient every time there's a bit of a shortfall to slap the country people around a bit, because it's a 2-to-1 vote in terms of Spring Street. And they can afford to lose a few seats there, provided they don't lose the city seats. Well, to be fair, why do country people put up with this? We pay 27% of all of the income for state and federal government, and we get about 9% back. In anyone's language, that's a poor investment. And not only that, the cost shift, when things like this happen, we get ministers that go and hide themselves in their closets and wait until, the dust has settled or there's one new disaster comes out. In the meanwhile, poor old country people who are, basically sitting in areas that are really tough. Our roads are buggered. It doesn't matter how much we increase our budget. While you've got growth, you've got road issues. But we're putting all these cost shifts into what really are state and federal government responsibilities, this being one of them. Now, blind Freddie could see that the minister should have come out and said, oh, well, listen, Tatch, we know you've got a problem down there. We know you're cranky. But I've always been cranky. I mean, that is a joke. I said, but it doesn't mean I won't talk to him. But he should have come there and said, listen, Tatch, we're about this $500,000. Why don't we get together and work out what we're going to do with the rest of the stuff that's sitting on that side? And why don't we try to come to the party a bit, and you come to the party a bit, and we'll come to a deal and come to some common sense arrangements. We'll work with them to clean up what's the rest of this, man. Because I've still got 4 times this sitting on someone's property. And nobody's done anything about it. Nobody seems to care about that. So we're going to go to a summit. I want local government and the people that are passionate about their point to come to the party and talk to us about the summit and say, right, if we can't get control from the legislation, why don't we start marching on these people and saying, well, hang on, we know what our responsibility is. We're in the people business. You people get in the people business. And maybe together we might end up with a better governance program. And these things won't happen. But sadly, they're all going to grunt. There's no opposition. They're too busy looking in the mirror, looking out the window to see what's really going on.
Are you inviting the minister or local MPs to come along to your summit? Would you like to have them there?
Absolutely. They're always invited. As you can imagine, Chris, they love being around me.
So given that, do you think they'll come?
Well, I hope so. I mean, they also know that I'm sensible. And if they want to come to the party and do some business and try and fix this problem for the people, I'll be the first one to the table. And I'll be the first one. I'll cut the roast, if you like, to make them welcome. But first thing they got to do is come.
Yes.
I can send out the invitation. But unfortunately, what we've learned about politicians of late is that if ever it's a little bit hot at the dinner table, there's a lot of apologies coming through the front door. I mean, I know that I've got to front up every day when we get it wrong. And I've got to eat my humble pie. So I suppose all we're asking is that come along and have a taste of some of the crust that's left of me. I hope they do turn up. And I've got nothing against them. I've got to tell you, country pollies have got the toughest gig in the world because they know they're outvoted 2-to-1 as well when they go into Spring Streets. When the pollies are working hard, they're working twice as hard in the bush. Geez, I don't think it's too much to ask for him to come along and say, right, we know Thatcher's got plenty to say. We know he gets cranky. Well, the best way to stop him being cranky is to, give my Shire a bit of attention.
Yes. All right. Now, look, clearly you don't pull any punches and you're known for that. This is your 5th time as mayor, as I understand it, and you've been on council for 13 years. Mayoral term coming to an end soon. What happens for you in another 6 weeks or so?
I think the rest of my time, like even on council, will be to try and mentor our future mayors and mentor our councillors and push them up. And the fact is, I became mayor this term because we had a brand new council we had all the wards removed, and we probably had 4 new players, probably 5, and we had 2 extra councillors. So they probably needed just someone that had a little bit of experience. And I don't profess to know everything, but I've been around a little bit, and I'm trying to guide them through that process. Local government's in strife for talent. The problems we're having are far more complicated than what they were 10 years ago. Trying to navigate their way around governments that probably hide a little, and also trying to navigate their way around new budgets. I think they're coming into this caper. We're expected to have the skill set of a large board of directors, but they don't generally. So they're on the steepest learning curve. And the fact is, I've got some councillors there that are working 60, 70 hours a week that have their own businesses and jobs because we're in such a growth zone. I know they whinge about councillors getting paid, but I mean, I don't know too many volunteers that will do 60, 70 hours a week and take all of the responsibility. So I have a soft spot for these new councillors, and I'm hoping that I'm not too hard a taskmaster, but I also expect them to come up to the plate as well. I'm not Mother Duck. I'm there if they need me, but I do expect them to perform. And I think we're very lucky at Moorabool. We've had our people step up pretty quickly, but that's probably because we're pretty hard on them. We try and get them going and remind them all the time that we're in the people business and that it is our responsibility. And the day you leave here, you'll be forgotten anyway. So make the most of it while you're there.
Before you become
and don't suffer from attention deprivation.
Before you become a feather duster, as they say.
Well, that's true, and I'm quite looking forward to that at some point. I've had a dream run, and I've met some great councillors, and for the anti-councillor that I am, I believe we have too much government, to be honest. I think 3 levels, was 4 with the Senate, really, is ridiculous. I think a country should get back to 2, and I think if you got back to 2, someone will have to take responsibility. When you got 3, it's like those 3 cups, with the ball.
Yeah, which one is it? Which one's it hiding in? All right.
I'd rather get it back to 2.
We're straying into different ground here, but
we are. Sorry.
It's been a delight to chat with you, Paul. But back to the issue at hand, the EPA issue and your summit. That's coming up on the 30th of October. I hope there's a lot of attendance at that, and I look forward to hearing how it goes. And I'd love to have a follow-up, perhaps with you or someone who's there after the event.
Oh, I think we'd love to be back, Chris. And look, I'd ask everyone, just come along and have a listen. Pick out the things you need. Tell us what you want. And hopefully, I don't know, well, before that big black panel van comes to pick me up, Chris, hopefully I'll get some of this stuff sorted. I'm sure it's on the Sandman.
Thanks very much for your time, Councillor Tatchell, Mayor of Moorabool Shire, and all the best with your efforts to shine a light on this issue. Thank you. And that's our podcast for today. Lots going on in the world of local government right now. We'll keep you up to date with new developments on our website and on our next edition on Friday. This was edition number 504 of the Roundup, recorded on the morning of Wednesday, the 15th of October 2025. Head to lgnewsroundup.com for more information about this episode, including story links. The podcast is brought to you by the Victorian Local Governance Association, the national broadcaster on all things local government, with support from Symphony 3, simple, connected customer experiences. It's recorded in the city of Greater Geelong, Victoria, on the land of the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nation. And we come your way every Monday, Wednesday and Friday. Until next time, thanks for listening, and bye for now. The VLGA's Victorian Councillor Census is back again in 2025. All councillors in Victoria will be emailed the census on the 6th of October and will have until the end of the month to complete. In its second year, the annual census captures and tracks councillor demographics, attitudes and the key challenges to local governance over time. You don't need to be a VLGA member to participate, and at no stage will the VLGA have access to an individual's responses. The findings of the census will inform, influence and lead conversations across local government and with other tiers of government, and all responses will be fully confidential. This is your chance to have your voice heard as a councillor. The Councillor Census is part of the VLGA's commitment to support councillors on their journey to be successful community representatives.